Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II. I am the chairman of the United States Transhumanist Party, and I am with three gentlemen here in Burbank, California, in the aftermath of an important event for the transhumanist movement, the Wellness and Longevity book signing seminar pertaining to the Transhumanism Handbook. It's a master compilation that we have been waiting for about 2 years. I've been collaborating with Newton Lee, who is the chairman of the California Transhumanist Party, who is the editor of the book. And Newton Lee put on quite an event. He had numerous speakers who each contributed a chapter to the book, including myself. I contributed a chapter called The United States Transhumanist Party and the Politics of Abundance. And we gave 10-minute presentations at this event. It was quite well attended. We had over 50 people present, a fully packed room with a lot of great audience interaction, a lot of questions, a lot of conversation afterward. And with me today I have Johannon who's the chairman of the Arizona Transhumanist Party, also one of our candidates in the Transhumanist presidential primary. I have Arin, who is the director of marketing for the U.S. Transhumanist Party. And I have Charles Holsopple, who is another one of our presidential candidates in the Transhumanist primary, as well as the Master of Ceremonies for this event. And I think, Charles, you did an excellent job, but I'd like to hear your impressions about the event.
You know, as a new transhumanist, it was quite informative and humbling, really, to listen and meet such devout and dedicated transhumanists that had a wealth of information, and some of the other nonprofits that were sponsored by the Institute for Education, Research, and Scholarships, particularly EASE, TT1D, type 1 diabetes. So yeah, it was definitely worth the trip out to California to meet you and Ben and the whole group. It was quite informative.
Excellent. Well, I'm very glad to hear that as a new transhumanist you're finding a lot of value in this movement, and definitely we are very happy to have you because you bring another perspective, and you've also been bringing new demographics into the movement with your Project 222 initiative and tying it to transhumanism. So could you perhaps talk about some of the approaches that you've employed in connecting the two and reaching out to members of the public who may not have been as familiar with transhumanism before?
Well, you know, to most people, I'm introducing at the same time 222 because it's a new concept to many people. And when I introduce myself along with Project 222, I can't separate myself from the Transhumanist Party at this point. So it's been a great dovetail. When I mention transhumanism, people say, well, I'm not sure what that is. And it's easy for me to say and tie the two together because what I say simply is that we're using technology and science and resources to better enhance the well-being and the longevity of life on the planet, both human life and I refer to all life. So yeah, to me it's a perfect segue, both 222 to transhumanism and transhumanism to 222. So, and a lot of that is in foreign countries where 222 is growing the fastest.
And that is quite an apt way to introduce transhumanism, particularly to those who haven't encountered the term before. And I think your experience speaks to an important, more general observation, and that is we still have immense room to affect public perception on transhumanism, because there are still a lot of people who haven't been exposed to it, who don't have any firm opinion of it. There are some people who have misconceptions about it, but I think transhumanists who have been in the movement for some time may overestimate how many of those people with misconceptions there are out there. I think probably our bigger task is just outreach and exposure, getting people aware of what transhumanism is.
Absolutely, that's my point. Yeah, most people, it's not that we're defending transhumanism in any way. It's actually introducing them to the concept, and then they're actually quite receptive, is what I found.
Yes, indeed. And from my own experiences, speaking to people who haven't been introduced to transhumanism, they very much resonate with yours in terms of what I've observed. Now, Arin, you're the director of marketing, and I think this very much speaks to the kinds of marketing that could get across to new audiences. So what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a great topic, by the way. I've always felt, ever since joining this movement, I've always felt the sorts of things we advocate for are what nearly everyone would want. Who wouldn't want to live disease-free? Who wouldn't want to live a longer and healthier life? So it's not that we're doing things that are radical. No, it's on the contrary, it's not radical at all. The causes we advocate for are noble. And I think that by focusing on that, by spreading the word, by raising awareness of the various projects that we advocate for and that we're involved in, and that our members in this movement are involved in, I really believe we're just at the beginning of really just growing the movement on a very wide scale. I really believe that.
Yes, indeed. So, Ben, you have been out on the campaign trail for quite some time. You've been reaching out to various constituencies, conducting interviews with various luminaries, both within and outside the transhumanist movement. What would you characterize the reception as being, and the perception of transhumanism that you've encountered in the course of those conversations?
Yes. Well, I think that almost everybody is not going to say no to health and wellness, and what Jose Cordero said to me on Friday, happiness. That's a part of this equation too. And I like to use the term de facto life extensionist. Who are those people who would not be interested in life extension? That's a slim 2% of the population. 98% of the people, when you have a public health service or implementations of a similar kind in place that offers interventions that would contribute to super longevity, they're not going to turn it down, and they're going to be there with bells on, and that's what we as a party have to offer. That not just the two-party system in the United States doesn't address, but all of the world, every part of the world can benefit from these ideas and this acceptance. What we need is a network effects, where we have people clamoring for this, where we have people working for it, citizen scientists, citizen engineers. We have to grow this. I would have liked to have said to everyone at this conference today, 300 close personal friends, maybe 200, maybe 50, talk to every one of them, because life extension, it is that important, and it doesn't take such a large critical mass to change some key things in terms of implementations and policy as well.
Yes, indeed. And we had quite an enthusiastic reception at this conference. Of course, most of the attendees already have some familiarity with transhumanism and life extension. We had some individuals who were newer to these ideas, but who were connected to some of the speakers, and they asked some intriguing questions during my various conversations with them. But yes, it seems that the predominant attitude is one of curiosity, perhaps wishing to probe a bit further and test out some of these ideas. Some people ask very thoughtful questions, or they want a bit more information, they want a bit more evidence. But as I pointed out in my remarks, when the Transhumanist Party set up its Cyborg and Transhumanist Forum at the Nevada State Legislature in May to oppose a bill that would have prohibited even voluntary implantation of microchip devices, our reception was not hostile at all. We spoke to over 50 legislators, lobbyists, staffers, and others who came by our table. and we showed them some of the technologies, we showed them some of the literature, we had some discussions of transhumanist philosophy, and there were varying degrees of interest, but very little overt hostility. We didn't have people picketing us, associating us with demonic forces or the Illuminati or anything like that. So
it's not a hard sell. I was saying, David and I were saying this before. It's radical life extension is really not that hard of a sell. It's cutting through butter with a hot knife. It's just that there happens to remain an ocean of butter that we have to cut through.
Right. So primarily, would you say the challenge in galvanizing the world to solve this problem is an informational one, an educational one, not so much overcoming pre-existing hostility?
Yes. And I think that no one understood that better than the founder of this organization, Zoltan Istvan. He positioned himself in the media in such a way that he was able to just get people talking about a longevity escape velocity. Just get that seed planted. And My Futurist New Deal has borrowed a lot from people in the debates and discussions, and people have been critical of that. But I'm proud to have that association, and I'm proud of all the work that all the people involved in this organization have been doing.
Yes, indeed. So, in terms of what you hope the 2020 Transhumanist presidential campaign accomplishes, whoever gets the nomination, what do you want that to be? What do you think that realistically could be? Charles, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, how I see the platform developing is really getting out the topics that we base core values, core ideals of the Transhumanist Party. I mean, as Ben says, it's not a tough sell. We're not, as long as we stay somewhere in what the conversation is about at the dinner table, and it's about having Anne and Gertrude live a longer life. It's about having the young child with type 1 diabetes living a longer life. So anyone that respects human life and the quality of life, I think we've got to get I'd love to get more of the entertainment world, the entertainment sector, making related television shows or films, short films, about the movement and about how it affects all of humanity in dealing with those existential threats that we're talking about. And I think that in order to get a really good new idea widely accepted, there has to be a certain amount of fear associated with the present paradigm. And we're getting that way as a civilization now. We're seeing the same threats. And I think it's a great opportunity and a timely opportunity to get our message out to the people into what they're currently thinking. It's a new idea. It's a new way of looking at the same situation.
And Charles spoke a moment ago about entertainment. I just finished shooting a pilot for it's a meditation on digital immortality, but it takes place in the context of present-day technology, using virtual reality and deepfake technology to create a kind of a digital reunion with a lost loved one. And it's a powerful and wonderful meditation on the subject. And I'm looking forward to having folks look at the teaser for that and give me their thoughts. But there's a lot of creative people. There's a lot of creative people in these organizations doing incredible work. And we have an opportunity to really present ourselves to the world through our policy and also just pique people's interest in ways of this kind.
Yes, so I heard a lot of suggestions about using entertainment, using media, using content that appeals to large numbers of people to convey the policy messages, perhaps in a different format from the ways in which policy messages are conventionally conveyed. So, Arin, from a marketing standpoint, how can transhumanist politics differentiate itself from mainstream politics, which turns off a lot of people? So we want transhumanist politics to attract a lot of people by contrast.
I love that question, and that really speaks to me. One of the ways I believe we can distinguish our movement, our politics, from the others is really to tap into the zeitgeist. Okay? I know that term is bandied about quite often, but one thing I've been talking about recently quite a bit is I believe transhumanism meshes really well with the electronic music scene. Not just because both are technological, but both really tap into deep emotions that people have. And I really believe that there could be huge synergies between transhumanism and the electronic music scene. And many people don't know that the famous DJ and producer Steve Aoki, he's a transhumanist. Could you imagine at one of his concerts us having a booth? And can you imagine that? And if we were to really tap in to these sorts of scenes, people would really see the huge synergies. And then our movement would explode. It literally would explode. We would get so many people on board because then it would really just click with them. Yeah, I can get into this. Right? And so I think we really got to tap into popular culture, movements that are popular among not just the youth, but just in people in general, right? And look for synergies. And I really do believe that's one avenue we could go down.
Yes, indeed. So the Transhumanism Handbook really covers a wide range of subjects, and it has contributions from authors focusing on longevity, artificial intelligence, politics, art, philosophy, culture, and it tries to essentially very broadly encompass all of these subjects under the umbrella of transhumanism. Now, what do you think it would take to get this term transhumanism rooted in the public imagination and associated with all of these areas, not just technology, but an entire worldview about the human condition, how the human condition can be improved, and the era that we should strive to live in as opposed to perhaps the problematic status quo era in which we live in? What would it take to get transhumanism recognized as essentially the world's aspiration?
I don't think it's leading with the word transhumanism. I think we need to get particular policies that we're presenting, unique and refreshing policies that people can look at and say, I relate to the policy, what's behind the policy, and if that's transhumanism. And not to quote 222 again, but I think that's a very simple message. Whether I'm the candidate or not, I think I'd like to see that being one of the messages that people, once you hear 222, you can't forget it, whether or not you support it or not. And other policies that we would champion, whether it be a universal basic income or any of the policies that any of the candidates that we kind of agree on, many of us agree on several policies. So I think we have to have a unified party and get the message out and have it presented in ways that are a little subtle, that become transhumanism by default, and not lead with the word transhumanism because people don't know it yet.
I have a little bit of a different idea. This is something that I've talked with the Estonian e-governance emissary Florian Marcus, talked to Paul Spiegel, an attorney who handles these kind of affairs. What I think we need to do is to have a small country that has good public health outcomes and that has a good public health service in place, and we need to develop a legal fund to make sure that public health service steps into the 21st century. And how do they do that? They have data science, they have monitoring of health systems for every citizen in this small country, they have the various interventions that we are coming to market now for life extension. When you have an entire country of immortalists, that is when transhumanism becomes a household name.
Yes, indeed. It seems like if we can find an opening somewhere to have a proof of concept that works for a society that embraces these ideals, then the rest of the world will see their efficacy and follow suit. This, I think, again draws upon some of the work of Zoltan Istvan, because in his novel, The Transhumanist Wager, he essentially conceives of such a society. It's a seasteading nation called Transhumania, and perhaps the parameters of that society are not exactly how we would want an actual real-world transhumanist society to work, but the entire idea is, once there is such a society, the world can't ignore it. The world has to respond to it in some way, and I think as a science fiction novelist who wanted to create some conflict to entertain his readers, Zoltan Istvan created a scenario where the attention of the world was hostility, and Transhumania ended up having to defend itself against the combined world powers. I hope in reality, if there were such a transhumanist society, instead the reaction of the world would be to assimilate the best ideas from it into other existing societies and governments, and gradually also move them toward the transhuman era. But I also wanted to ask for your thoughts as to what are some of the obstacles to the advancement of transhumanism, or the achievement of radical life extension, or the achievement of universal prosperity, or fulfilling even people's basic needs in the world. So please feel free to share your thoughts about the challenges that we need to overcome.
The main challenge is that big ocean of butter that we have to cut through. The people do not have the political will to contribute to these institutions, to the development of these technologies in the way that they could. You know, there's a real sense in which there is a relatively long run way for universal longevity escape velocity today, but a small shift in people's opinions could shorten that runway significantly. And you know, how many millions of people would be alive for having done so? This is a conversation that we all need to be having. That's why I say to these people at this event, talk to everyone you know about life extension. And you don't have to talk about a science fiction story. You can talk about simple things, using the iWatch. You can talk about all of the many things in the SENS world, Aubrey de Grey and Michael Rose talking about today. These are real biomedical technologies that we can be describing. We should not be a party of people talking about a lot of fancy stories and far futurist things exclusively. And to the extent that we can be messaging a little more precisely and thinking a little more clearly about who we are as an organization, we will all benefit tremendously for it.
Mm-hmm. So Arin, what are your thoughts about challenges to transhumanism?
Well, there are many, but not for the reasons we might think. I think first and foremost, the biggest challenge is our own mindset. Specifically, many people don't think it's possible, right? The facts remain that ever since the beginning of time, every single person who's ever aged, who's ever lived has aged, and every single who's ever aged has eventually died. So I think a lot of it is just limiting beliefs within humanity, but I think one way to resolve that is for us to present data, for us to present evidence, and people will respond quite favorably to it. Let's just show people what's possible using science, using data, and appealing to them, right? Not just by showing numbers, appealing to emotion. One question I always ask is, if it were possible to live 5 more years of a healthy life, would you be interested in it? And I would think nearly everyone would be interested in that. So I believe that's the way we've got to approach it. Do the research, do the projects, show the evidence, show the data, show it can be done, and then I think we'll get more support for it.
Yeah. The average human lifespan is tripled in the industrial era. And there was not some Faustian bargain that was made to triple your lifespan. There's just ordinary kinds of things happening, and that's what's going to continue to happen. People who are have another view of transhumanists, those we are not the strange people in that equation. Those are the strange people who, for whatever reason, are afflicted with confused thinking. That's not who we are.
Yes, indeed. And I will actually return to that subject in a little bit, but first, Charles, I'd like to hear your thoughts about challenges to transhumanism and the widespread adoption of transhumanist thinking.
Well, when people that have heard it once or twice, that maybe not the first time, but a lot of times they'll key on the extremes that we talk about, the radical life extension. They'll catch on radical, and it's not part of that tub of butter. You know, it's something that's a high mountain that they don't see any particular personal use in, that they're not interested in that. But when we go back to the general health and well-being of people, using technology to enhance their life or their children's lives or their parents' lives. So I think the more mainstream we stay with our goals that we can describe are part of other people's goals. We just look at it with a more scientific approach to it, with a more perhaps optimistic approach of using that technology, and as well as the urgency of the existential threats that are confronting us, and how we are anxious to address those without putting them under the rug.
Yes. So I think one differentiating aspect between any degree of transhumanism and more conventional paradigms of thinking is that transhumanism is inherently incompatible with defeatism. So if you look at an issue like climate change, for instance, I have been seeing some fairly concerning rhetoric from some individuals saying, oh, deleterious climate change is just inevitable. Humanity is doomed and there's nothing we can do about it. And for me, whatever one's views are on the extent of the climate change problem, I think that kind of defeatist perception is inimical to transhumanism.
And Daniel Yelishvili gave an incredible talk on this very subject just moments ago. And reach out to Daniel. See what he has to say. Look at his chapter in the Transhumanist Handbook. Look at the videos that are available discussing these things, because bioremediation, these are real implementations. These are things that we can do. We are not facing existential risks yet. And we can, and transhumanists can be the people who rise above not just the defeatist rhetoric, but rise above intellectually, bringing our society to a golden era in the 21st century.
One of the distinguishing aspects of transhumanism is the view that there's no problem that cannot theoretically be overcome through some combination of technological means and human ingenuity. Now, we may not always arrive at the best solution right away. It may take a certain degree of advancement to get to that kind of solution. But there's always hope. There's always the potential to do better. There's always the potential to deploy technology for good rather than for ill. But I would like to return to this question of some people misinterpreting transhumanism, perhaps intentionally so. There's a particular strain of conspiracy-minded individuals who seem to have picked transhumanism as their target for just these wild fabrications, the idea that this is some elite Illuminati conspiracy to take over the world and control people somehow, when of course nothing can be farther from the truth. But what do you think is the relative impact of these kinds of people? Can they just be ignored or overlooked, or do we need to more actively engage them, debunk them, make it clear that their views are just completely at odds with reality? Or do you think that's obvious for most people?
Well, I'll say this: I'm not an Illuminati, so I don't have a crystal ball. But I think of the Louise Brown, the first test tube baby in the 1970s. There was this gestation. It was in Time magazine, and every magazine. It became a moral panic in the United States about this test tube baby. And suddenly, everybody was talking about fertility medicine. And they were scared. But it wasn't the end of the world, but they were scared. And then the baby was born. And it wasn't a hideous miscreation. It was a nice baby. Life extension is a nice baby.
Yes.
And so those guys who are doing that, they're doing us a favor. They're doing something that no presenter could ever do. Now maybe it turns into a situation where countries begin legislating against such things. That's a bad thing. But I don't see that happening in the developed world. What I see happening is that this is free publicity that you couldn't buy for love or money. But there's certainly we have to lean into it, I think. But we also want to always be speaking out against anything that's questionable, and always making ourselves well understood.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Arin, what do you think from a marketing standpoint? Are the conspiracy theorists helping us or hurting us, and what should be done?
That's a great question. I would say probably a little bit of both. I agree with Ben. Getting publicity is generally good. Now, we hope that it's going to be good publicity. And further, I would say that no matter what you do, there are going to be certain people who are not going to like what you're doing. You could be doing incredible humanitarian work, like the kind of work that Charles has been advocating for, and you're still going to get some people who are surprisingly, they're against it. I believe there's no way to prevent this. I also believe what we've got to do is, again, reach out to people, touch people, and show them the work that we're doing, and try to connect with them on an individual basis, because that's really how bonding begins. Is you've got to have some sort of connection with people, a real connection. And I think by doing this great work and spreading the word about it, we will touch people on a real deep level. And on the other hand, though, we should definitely speak out against lies and hate and these sorts of things we don't tolerate at all. But on the other hand, some publicity is invariably going to be good for us. But I think at the end of the day, we've got to stay on our game plan and do the important work and publicize it.
Yes, indeed. So, Charles, what are your thoughts about the conspiratorially minded and what impact, positive or negative, they could have on perceptions of our movement?
I think that the number of people that will actually come out with derogatory terms are small by comparison. And if they come out and they say something, and if we get into the conversation to defend ourselves too much, it muddies the water. But just like there's like 1% of the population are sociopaths, from what I understand, and many times those people rise to a level of high corporate responsibility, and their sociopathic tendencies serve them very well. I think someone that takes the time to really attack the Transhumanist Party does not fully understand what we stand for, what we advocate, and shouldn't be given too much time. I think we could use our time better to promote our positive message.
Yes, indeed.
Once we address the accusation that it exists.
By the way, if we were funded by the Illuminati, we wouldn't be sitting here, right? Videotaping ourselves. We'd be in some like villa in Monaco somewhere, right? And we'd have quite a few more zeros at the end of our bank account. So I'd just like to point that out.
I have yet to receive one phone call from the Illuminati asking me, well, Mr. Stolyarov, what do you need to make the Transhumanist Party a worldwide phenomenon? Do you need legions of followers? Do you need endless cash? Tell us what you need and we'll provide it to you. In some ways, I wish I had received such a phone call, but it is not forthcoming. So, one final question to all of you, given that, Charles, you mentioned better ways of spending our time than engaging some of that negativity, is this. We have less than a month left until voting opens on September 22nd in our primary election. What recommendations would you have for both our members as well as the candidates running in the primary as to what they could be doing to use their time well in the month leading up to the election in order for the result to be the most constructive and the most impactful for maximizing the exposure of transhumanism and the beneficial perception of it?
The honest answer would be for all of the candidates to adopt Project 222 and use their strengths in order to promote themselves, but at the same time seeing the vision, because I really do think 222 has the ability to draw people together. The fact that transhumanism comes with it, Ben has great strengths. The other candidates have their strengths, and we need a unifying message. We're not just putting one candidate; we're putting the whole party up, and we have to stand for something. And it's no secret that I would lead the 222, and I think we need to put a platform together. This is, again, it's a very new party. We have very few members. If we increase by 1,000%, we're still will have relatively few members. But if we get a unique message out there that's credible, and we have credible people endorsing it, I think that's whatever the policies are. We need to make sure that they have they're based in facts, and also they help inspire.
So Ben, what do you think the candidates and the members of the Transhumanist Party should be doing in the coming month prior to the election?
Well, I mean, I have just 4 words to say about that. Sign up and vote. If you don't have the courage of your convictions to stand with longevity advocates, if you're a part of this organization and you don't have the courage of your convictions to do at least that, I don't know that history is going to remember you well. We really need to not just be sniping from outside, not just making humorous comments about this or that futurist notion. We need to sign up and vote, get involved with this organization, tell all of those people you know about life extension, do what you can, don't just be a hanger-on.
Yes, indeed. And to reinforce that, we have a 50% member turnout requirement in our election. So if you want to have the results be announced sooner, be part of the process to make that happen. So this means 50% of the current members at the time that voting opens have to cast their ballot before we announce our results. And I don't know in advance how long it would take. We will leave voting open for at least a week, but it may take longer than that. And we are going to continue to appeal to the membership to please participate in the process, please vote. It is a historic occasion, the first competitive transhumanist political primary ever. So become part of history and help us achieve a result that is broadly representative of the transhumanist movement. Arin, what are your thoughts as to what the candidates and the members should be doing?
I think it's what these gentlemen said. It's going to come down to involvement, action, movement. Listen, every person's responsible for themselves for making that move. If 1 million people make that movement, it'll change the world, right?
Yes, indeed.
So I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to action, movement. There's definitely something in our movement, in our platform, in our organization that is of interest to someone. So pick something you like, whether it's life extension or whether it's curing disease or alleviating poverty or human rights, whatever it may be. There is more than likely a mention of that in our platform. Get involved in that way. Do something.
Absolutely. Yes.
And tell someone else and ask them to do it. I think if we're going to vote, we should, if we have that conviction, we probably should take somebody, explain what we're doing, and expose them to transhumanism as well.
Yes, indeed.
Like my friend Jose Cordero, brilliant man, a vice chair of Humanity Plus. His resume cannot even be listed in a timely fashion in this forum. He says, and he was kind enough to endorse the Futurist New Deal. He had some very kind words to say on that subject. He says, energy. That's what we need. That is the difference between that long runway. We don't want to see your loved ones miss this opportunity. We need you to take a stand, bring people into the longevity community, do that work. It's not that hard. It's just outreach.
Yes, indeed. So bring that energy into the process. Register to be a member of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. If you haven't done that already, go to transhumanist-party.org/membership. If you are a member already, please make sure to vote on September 22nd when you receive your ballot. And as we've all said, help us change the world, because we can with enough of your support. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this conversation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.